examples in the history of the last 30 years of the surveillance society that has been developed. I just pointed to a few issues that I think needed to be addressed at that stage, and we were looking to campaign around, or it has to be Suresh, to campaign around to see over the last 12 months what improvements we could arrive at. I don't think we've moved on at all. In fact, we may well have gone backwards, and some of the aspects of the work that we've been doing and engagement on some of the cases that we've been dealing with have actually not only gone backwards, they've almost produced moments of farce, to be frank. The three aspects I raised last year, I recall, was the 80s experience about the scale of surveillance and what happens when the scale of surveillance almost goes beyond control. And in the 80s, some of you will remember, a number of us were campaigning on Irish human rights issues, in particular the Operation of Prevention of Terrorism Act. The first people arrested under the PTA were the Guildford Four, and I shared the Guildford Four campaign, and Gareth here, who were working with other lawyers, thank God, secured their release from a miscarriage of justice. But the issue throughout the 80s was that, as Paddy Hilliard's book outlined, the Irish community in Britain became a suspect community. And the scale of the arrests under the PTA was extraordinarily large, permeating and penetrating the Irish community in Britain on a scale that actually, I think, shocked large numbers of people. And it was enormous. People being lifted on a regular basis, people being lifted as they came backwards and forwards from Ireland, and also from the streets of London itself. Paddy Young did a piece of work which was extraordinary as well, in that we couldn't understand how stop and search on the Irish community at that point in time actually was in larger numbers than it was for black and ethnic minorities. Now, how could that be? You know, the Irish don't necessarily have completely different profiles from the rest of the community. They're not a different colour or anything like that. And then the work that Young did actually demonstrated what they described as larking and lurking, where actually it was police officers lurking outside particular Irish venues and pubs, etc., and then picking people up as a result of that. So there was an element of profiling to that extent. And what we found, the enormous numbers of people who were simply harassed as a result of the PTA, and it produced very limited returns in terms of any forms of prosecutions, and in fact actually alienated the sections of the community rather than encourage their cooperation in the confrontation with illegality and terrorism. And that went on, but it produced horrendous miscarriages of justice, the Guildford Four, the Birmingham Six, which you'll hear about. Paddy Hill's talked at length at our various meetings on the experiences that came out of that. And I think that demonstrated to me very, very briefly what happens when you have an uncontrolled scale of surveillance going on that actually damages the whole community and depicts one section of its society, as Paddy Hilliard said, as a suspect community. I think that was a lesson that we need to learn for what's happening at the moment for other communities that are then being almost depicted both in terms of practice, policing practice, etc., surveillance practice, and also the media as suspect communities. The second case I referred to last year was my own constituency case of Ricky Reel. Sutcliffe Reel, Mrs. Reel will be here tomorrow. We'll be able to talk to people and respond to any questions. But just to recap, what that was about was a constituent of mine, Brunel Stewart, a young man who went out for a night out in Richmond and then went missing, and the family couldn't understand why he hadn't come home that night, contacted me as the local police, local MP, and because they contacted the police and not had much of a response. In fact, no response at all, apart from distraction, to be frank. And then Suresh and I were involved in the case throughout, and what happened there is that we were querying and questioning the police inquiry. Eventually, Ricky's body, unfortunately, was found in the Thames, exactly where we thought he went missing. After a week, it took us a week to get the body found. The investigation was extremely poor. We had IPCC investigations, and again, information was refused to the family, and eventually we got leaked information, which I read out on the floor of the House of Commons, because that was the only way we could get it out there. And all the way through that campaign, we set up a campaign, all the way through that campaign, our one desire, really, our one campaigning objective was to get more police resources to effectively search for what people who may well have produced Ricky's death, because we believe he was racially assaulted or certainly racially abused before he went missing. And all through that time, we would just say we need a better investigation, we need police resources. And then last year, Suresh and I and the family were met with the Hearn inquiry officers who were told actually we did have police officers involved in the campaign, but they were undercover and we were being surveilled as a result. But don't worry, we were told, don't worry, because this was simply collateral intrusion. Now, I've never heard of collateral intrusion. But what it was, it seems that they were surveilling some individuals or others who got involved in our campaign, and as a result of that, we were being surveilled at the same time. And there was a real irony there, that here we were desperate for policing resources to investigate the case, and the policing resources that were being applied were actually as part of surveillance of what we were doing. So this is the irony. They were surveilling our campaign to get more police resources. It's part of it. What happened after the conference last year is that we then sought further information. We asked for full information from Scotland Yard that was being held on members of the campaign, and the family in particular. And again, we thought as a result of some of this exposure through Hearn, etc., we would then learn some lessons, we'd meet constructively with Scotland Yard, and jointly we would learn what went on, get the truth, and then learn lessons from it. What then happened, we did, Suresh and I, the family, we met in Scotland Yard, and we were given a redacted version of the files and references to us. And the redacted versions were literally possibly one word a page, or one sentence a page. And then what happened was, well, thank you very much, but we'd like to take these away and think about this. And you can't take them away. Because if you put them together with other redacted versions we've given other people, you can complete sentences and whole pages. At that point in time, they apologised to us for their involvement in all of this, at which point in time, this is quite rightfully and in a very dignified way, so we do not accept your apology. And then we looked at the redacted pages again and all fell about laughter. Because it was absolute farce in terms of this openness and transparency that they're then supposed to be adopting, and the apologies that were given to this whole nature of surveillance. And we still haven't got, Suresh can confirm, and Mrs. Realby as well, we still haven't got the full transparency about what information was held on us, and how that was used, and in fact how that was collected as well. So actually, rather than go forward from what we thought last year we might get some more of the truth about what was going on, we've actually gone backwards. Because I think we were treated, to be frank, and I don't say this lightly, I think we were treated with contempt by the way in which they refused to give us full access to the information concerned, and then to give us an apology in those terms was just unacceptable. And although we fell about laughing at the end of it, to be frank, it also stirred up all the memories of the family of what went on, and was extremely distressing for the family afterwards too. That was the other example I gave last year, and again, I just thought we might have had some breakthroughs on that. We didn't. I think we've gone backwards to a certain extent, because they're trying to close the waters over what went on. And the third one, which I referred to last year, Dave Smith, was the blacklisting campaign, and the information that we got during the campaign in recent periods about the scale of surveillance of individual trade unionists by the police itself, and again the penetration of our campaigns around blacklisting over the years. And the key issue for us was the connection between the Consulting Association, which was holding information on blacklisted workers that was being provided to companies, and if you recall from what we discovered, some of that information could only have come from either the police or security services, the nature of people being on demonstrations against fascists and things like that. So there's much broader than just their trade union activities or their health and safety activities, as trainings, etc. And then we got a statement from one of the officers involved in the special unit surveillance confirming that actually not only blacklisted workers had been surveilled, but so had prominent trade unions and individual trade unions as well that had been targeted. Now what comes out of that is the Pitchford inquiry, in which again I'm hoping that at least we'll get some nearer to the truth of what's gone on. But the three things that came from me really was, one, still the scale of surveillance operations that have gone on in the past and continue to go on from the examples that we've had, certainly with regard to blacklisting in recent years. That's the first thing. The second thing, there seems to be no process by which any parameters are set on those surveillance operations. There doesn't seem to be any democratic accountability in terms of setting those parameters. And the third thing as well is this whole issue around openness, transparency and democratic accountability. And if the Ricky Real case has anything to go by, the opaqueness continues even at this stage on historical cases. The opaqueness, and if you look at an example, possibly one of the worst examples is the Shrewsbury pickets. We still haven't got the information, even though the CCRC is investigating, and the CCRC has said it can't continue its investigation in any depth further until certain documents are released, and that's within political control, and yet again they've been closed down for 30 years yet again. So again,